Yo, what up? My name's Braden, and welcome to Music Philosophy, the show where I dive maybe a little too deep into all sorts of musical concepts. I make a video like this every week, so if you're interested in seeing more, be sure to subscribe. Today, I'm going to break down a song by Tigran Hamasyan, who in my opinion is one of the greatest composers in the world and just a monster pianist. Before I say more, let's take a quick listen. This is the beginning of The Grid by Tigran Hamasyan. That was my own transcription for copyright reasons, but I highly encourage you to go listen to the real song. There's a link in the description. It's a masterpiece. And believe it or not, there's an argument to be made that this song is actually in 4/4. In this video, I'll break down the song to explain how that could even be possible. We'll ponder what it really means for a song to be in 4/4, and then we'll decide if that's really the right time signature for this song, or if it's actually in something completely different. Let's get into it.
Music philosophy.
So what the heck is going on here? Let's listen to that excerpt one more time and pay close attention to where you feel the downbeats to be. If you're like me, you probably hear the accents as the downbeats. That's these notes. If we look at the piano part, which is just straight 16th notes, the accents form this 5-5-7, 5-5-5 pattern. And this pattern is essentially the backbone that runs through the whole song. This seems pretty irregular, so how could it possibly be in 4/4? Well, if we count up all the notes in a phrase, we get 32 total notes. As long as we assume they're 16th notes, that's 8 full counts, so we end up with a 2-bar phrase in 4/4, and that places the accents here. So the notes that just felt like downbeats are now heavily syncopated. And this isn't out of nowhere. There's a hint that's telling us that this might actually be what's going on, the title of the song, The Grid. Grid exercises are patterns that work on accenting different partials within a beat. For the standard one, you accent the downs, e's, ands, and uhs while playing consistent 16th notes. An exercise like this is an extremely important part of any musician's repertoire, as it helps you understand where each partial of the beat lives. When you think about it, this accent pattern from the song is really just an interesting grid pattern, emphasizing different partials of each beat. 1, E, and, Calling the song The Grid shows this was likely intentional, and the song was possibly written in 4/4. But all that aside, is this really the right way to classify the song? Because to be honest with you, I'm not convinced. Okay, so why not? Well, I don't think it's right to say that something is in 4/4 just because it fits nicely in a 4/4 space. And there's a quick example to show this. Here we have a simple 3/4 pattern. But look, if we stick it in 4/4, it fills the space fine. So should we say that this beat is actually in 4/4, just in 3-bar phrases? No, of course not. We all feel the beat in 3, not in 4. And this is the crux of the issue, because while the grid may fit in 4/4, and may have even been originally written in 4/4, that's not how people actually hear it. Which brings us to the core question of the video. What does it mean for a song to be in 4/4? This is something I've been struggling a bit to articulate, because to me it has more to do with the feeling of 4/4 than the space of it. We need to make a distinction between two different types of downbeats, notational downbeats and perceived downbeats. Notational downbeats are simply beat 1 of each measure. We always align ourselves to the beginning of each bar when we're reading music. Perceived downbeats are where the listener hears downbeats to be without seeing any notation. Good notation should then aim to align these two types of downbeats in the most sensible way. Okay, so quick clarification. Don't overthink this idea of perceived downbeats. It's just, when you're listening to the music, where do you bob your head, right? We all kind of have an understanding when we listen to a beat as to where the groove lies. If we look back at this 3/4 example, every single listener is going to hear it in groups of 3, so our perceived downbeats fall here, at the beginning of each bar. Even if it was, for some reason, notated in 4, that wouldn't matter. The listener does not have access to the notation and will still hear it in the same way. the perceived downbeats remain at the beginning of each set of 3. And this is really important. The notation doesn't matter. The way the musicians feel it doesn't matter. What matters is how the listener feels it. Now, we want these perceived downbeats to align with our notational ones. And if we write the beat in 4/4, that doesn't happen. We get all this misalignment. But in 3/4, things are perfectly aligned, and we can say that that's the better way to write it. When I say that the goal is to align notational downbeats with perceived downbeats, I don't necessarily mean they have to be like one-to-one perfect match. Let's just look at this rock groove. Green arrows are perceived downbeats. Red arrows are notational downbeats. There's not a red arrow for every green arrow, but they do line up in this very regular, predictable way. And that's what we want to try to achieve. You want these downbeats to align because you want the musicians to know exactly how the music is supposed to feel. It's going to help the group dramatically if everyone is on the same page for how the music should be felt. And this is the problem with the grid, because while it may be written in 4/4, while the musicians themselves may be feeling it in 4/4, I find it highly unlikely that the listener feels it in 4/4. And I say that because, well, I like to think I'm fairly rhythmically inclined. I've transcribed parts of this song myself, and I have a really clear idea of how the 4/4 lines up with the accent pattern. But when I listen to it, I just can't get myself to hear it in 4/4. The perceived downbeats do not align with the notational downbeats of 4/4, and it's all the drummer's fault. Now, the drumming is exceptional, but it's not in 4/4. I mean, just look at what's being played when it's written in 4/4. I've done the best I can to make this as readable as possible, and it still kind of looks like mashed potatoes. But if we write it in a series of 5-5-7, 5-5-5-16, like the accent pattern, the same beat suddenly becomes much clearer. In all the 5s, we get nice 3+2 patterns. In the 7s, we get 2+3+2 patterns. It's all much more understandable. And the big thing is, on count 1 of every measure, a notational downbeat, we have something strong pulling our ear, a perceived downbeat. The drum part is very intentionally outlining and pulling us towards the 5-5-7, 5-5-5 pattern and not a 4/4 pattern. Drums are, by far, the most powerful tool for affecting how a song is felt, creating perceived downbeats. To demonstrate how dramatically drums can change feel, I'm going to play that same excerpt again. But in the first half, I'm going to replace the drums with a really simple 4/4 beat. And I challenge you to maintain that feel as it switches back to the original drums halfway through. When you contrast the basic 4/4 feel with the real groove of the song, they're completely different. If this was the real drum part in the song, then it would be perfectly correct to say the song is in 4/4. The downbeats align, the listener hears it in 4, no problem. But the drum beat is this, with downbeats here, and even though it still fills the same amount of space, we need to adjust our notation to keep things clear. And it's for that reason that I don't think it's very useful to say this song is in 4/4. It just doesn't have a 4/4 feel. And in practice, I doubt the musicians are actually feeling this in 4. I mean, Tigran is a mad genius, but the drummer is so committed to outlining the 5-5-7, 5-5-5 pattern that I find it unlikely he's feeling 4 on top of that. It would just be harder than it's worth. So if the goal is to explore these odd types of patterns, then why would Tigran Hamasyan bother making it add up to 4/4? Isn't that kind of limiting in its own way? Because this isn't something that's specific to the grid. I just chose that song because I like it, but there are many other songs of his that do the same thing. Why? Well, in my video 2 weeks ago, I talked about music being this balance of expectations, and how if you defy expectations too much, people will think your music is chaotic and bad, but if you pander to expectations, they'll just find it boring. The pattern of the grid, being made out of 5s and a 7, is pretty unexpected and different. It tips the scale. But since the overall structure of this pattern equals the same amount of space as 4/4, there's some subconscious familiarity about how long the pattern is, how it fits in space, and it helps the brain understand how it works. It helps even the scales back out. So let's recap. I've seen a number of videos talking about how much of Tigran Hamasyan's music is actually in 4/4, but I just disagree with that. While it may fit in a 4/4 space, the actual feel of the song is completely different, and so it's not very useful to think of it in 4. However, it is useful for the composer to have the overarching amount of space be something common like 4/4, as it helps the listener find some familiarity in an unfamiliar pattern. But in my opinion, it would be unclear to notate the entire song based on this overarching amount of space, as our notational downbeats would not align with our perceived downbeats. It's much better to write it based on the accent pattern, in this case using a combination of 5/16 and 7/16, in order to give a better alignment of downbeats and a clearer representation of the music. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Music Philosophy. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more. I make a video like this every week, and you're not going to want to miss the next one. In the meantime, you can click here to watch the previous episode, or here to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.